Imagine being a member of the most watched family in the world, your every move analyzed, your words scrutinized, and your upbringing unfolding in front of global eyes. Now imagine being Princess Charlotte, the only daughter of Prince William and Princess Catherine, third in line to the throne, growing up not only under the weight of royal tradition, but also inside the walls of a modern British school. You'd think her life is all crowns and carriages, but not today. In this story, Charlotte's classmate, Catherine, a quiet, thoughtful girl, is publicly mocked by their own teacher right in front of Charlotte. Classroom freezes. What happens next? Charlotte, calm, poised, and just 10 years old, rises in a way no one expects. What she says not only flips the entire moment on its head, but reminds everyone that grace, courage, and leadership aren't taught, they're inherited. Stick around because this response, it's royal-level powerful, and it left the entire class and that teacher completely speechless. Princess Charlotte's Royal Journey. Her birthday is of May 2nd in the year 2015, and she's a member of the royal family of the United Kingdom. Her grandparents are Royal Prince Charles III and Diana, Princess of Wales, and she's their granddaughter. Her parents, William, Prince of Wales, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, she's the only daughter they've ever had, and she's the second child overall. She currently occupies the third position in the line of succession to the throne of the United Kingdom, which is the order of succession to the King of England. Prior to the year 2017, her family had been residing in Anmer Hall, which is located in Norfolk. Charlotte was born there. In 2017, her family relocated to Kensington Palace. In 2017, they relocated to Kensington Palace, which was a relocation that they made. Beginning in the month of January 2018, Charlotte began attending Wilcox Nursery School. This step marked the beginning of her time spent at the institution. During the month of September 2019, she began attending Thomas's School in Battersea, where she was known as Charlotte Cambridge. This experience was the beginning of her educational journey. Therefore, she was present in order to engage in conversation with her older brother George. After the family moved to Adelaide Cottage in Windsor Home Park in 2022, she and her brothers George and Louis started attending Lambrook, an independent preparatory school based in Berkshire. Everyone is completely taken back by Charlotte's reaction. When Princess Catherine began her day, it was a typical Thursday morning at the beginning of March. She was getting ready for the day. The mentality that prevailed was one of ease and relaxation. She made her way to the kitchen to make herself a cup of tea, and the palace continued to be in a condition of peace as she did so. She was in the process of preparing her morning beverage when she saw that the sky was gradually beginning to exhibit a more brilliant appearance. In spite of the fact that the clock had already struck 6 o'clock, she'd already changed into her clothes and done her hair. She had a very full schedule ahead of her, with meetings set for that day, as well as a trip to school, and she was prepared to depart because of this tremendously hectic agenda. Her schedule was really packed, and she was getting ready to leave because she had a lot of things to do. When she'd finished getting George, Charlotte, and Louis ready for the day, she had already gotten them in the car and driven them to their respective schools. Catherine loses her composure as a result of the teacher's amusing manner. "Your shirt isn't tucked in properly today. I hope you're not becoming lazy," Your Highness, Miss Hall, commended with a tone that was more condescending. Catherine, who was taken aback by the statement, walked down to straighten Charlotte's attire. The place was completely silent as the speaker said, "I hope you're not becoming lazy." Complete silence prevailed throughout the area as the speaker stated the statement. In close proximity, Charlotte was standing. She spoke quietly to her daughter and said, "It's okay, darling, stand tall." However, Miss Hall was not finished with her remarks. She continued to speak to her daughter. At the end of her remarks, she made the observation that some parents are so focused on their public figure that they forgot the basics, such as teaching their children how to dress properly. The words were quite painful to listen to. Catherine was aware of the growing fury that was building up within her, but she was able to maintain a serene expression on her face in spite of the discomfort that she was experiencing from the situation. Although they made an effort to conceal the developing tension from their children, the other parents found it difficult to resist seeing it. This was despite the fact that they were trying to keep it from their children. It was obvious that there was an absence of sound in the environment. Following the humiliation that she was subjected to at the hands of a teacher. As she made her way down the corridor following her conversation with Mrs. Hall, she was aware of a great burden that was pressing down on her chest. She desired to escape the conversation that was taking place. It was a teacher who had sent that information to her, but it had not been communicated to her child in front of her. However, rather than allowing it to fester, she made the decision to keep her calm and control throughout the situation. She did this while thinking about Charlotte and the feelings that the young girl might be experiencing. After spending a considerable amount of time sitting in her vehicle for a short period of time, she eventually got out of driving. As soon as Catherine took up the phone, she immediately dialed her secretary's number in order to confirm the future meetings that she'd scheduled for herself. In spite of the fact that the event had already taken place, she kept up a professional tone throughout the course of the process. In spite of the fact that she'd already arrived at her workplace at 9 o'clock in the morning, she was not thinking about her work at that moment. Throughout the remainder of the day, Charlotte was the individual who was the sole subject of her internal thoughts. What are the ways in which this could potentially have an effect on any of her children? Just make an effort to imagine how she would be feeling. Catherine came to the realization that she fought to provide a voice for all her children. Despite the fact that she's concentrating on the task at hand, she cannot help but think about what Miss Hall had said. It was just a few minutes before lunchtime when the meeting came to an end. And then Charlotte's teaching assistant took the initiative to send her a message regarding a particular matter. "I'm writing to inform you that Charlotte is doing well. Please accept my sincere regards, Miss Peters. Good morning, Your Royal Highness." Catherine smiled warmly in response to the message that was sent to her. Put it mildly, Charlotte was not allowing the happenings of today to have any effect on her academic performance. Catherine, on the other hand, was well aware that she could not allow it to continue in that fashion. Teachers have a responsibility to reprimand children, but there's a method of instruction that does not entail humiliating either the children or their parents. She discussed upcoming exhibitions as well as patronage programs when she was speaking at the National Portrait Gallery team. Her chat took place during the course of the conversation. In spite of the fact that her thoughts were constantly going back to the things that Miss Hall had said, she managed to keep her composure and her voice serene during the entire conversation. As soon as she received the call, she ran straight to the window and stood there, looking out over the entire garden. Not because she wanted to be a drama queen, but because she wanted to make sure that no child, royal or otherwise, would ever be humiliated in such a fashion again. She was conscious that she needed to have a chat with the headmaster of the school. In spite of the fact that she desired to react, during the time that she was picking up her phone to make contact with Mr. Thomas, her secretary reached out and gently tapped on the door to inform her that the lunch was currently ready. She then went on to make a phone call to Mr. Thomas. She was thinking about some of the ways in which she could approach the situation with wisdom while she was eating at her desk. She was doing this while she was eating. She had a change of heart a little while later, and after lunch she made the decision that she would not immediately call the headmaster. She decided that she would wait until after lunch. To begin, she did not want the situation to get even more bad, and she did not want the public to see the school in a terrible manner. This was especially true when considering the fact that the school was well-esteemed and admired by a large number of people. In addition, she intended to take some time to carefully consider the most efficient means by which she could transmit her worry to the appropriate parties. At roughly 2 in the morning, she made her way to the small reading room that was situated behind her office. She was carrying her notes for the early year speech that she was preparing for the following week, but she still managed to make her way there. Despite this, her thoughts found themselves continually diverted. She was supposed to be picked up at her destination. She went to Charlotte's school in the later part of the day to pick her up rather than sending the security team on their own when they were supposed to do. It was her belief that her daughter required her presence in order to cope. When she got to Thomas Battery, the grounds of the school were already crowded with parents who were waiting by the admission points. She was the only one who had arrived at the school. Following her exit from her vehicle, Catherine made her way to the section of the school where the pupils were waiting to be picked up when she arrived. There were a couple of parents who showed her a polite nod, while others muttered between themselves in a manner that was somewhat subdued. Charlotte stepped from the room, holding her reading folder in her hand as soon as she saw her mother come into view. As soon as she saw her mother, her face lit up with joy and she screamed out, "Mommy!" Catherine knelt down to give her daughter a warm embrace. After that, Catherine asked Charlotte, "How was your day?" Charlotte was afraid to answer her question. Following Miss Hall's statement that I didn't read clearly during class, Catherine answered with a smile and said, "You did your best, and that's what matters the most." In response to Miss Hall's statement, when compared to other days, it's not unusual for some days to be more difficult than others. During the time that they were moving toward the vehicle, both Charlotte's performance on the spelling exam and her performance in the netball game were presented and discussed. As a result of the things that she shared with Charlotte, she made the following statement in reference to the event that occurred in the morning. "You did nothing wrong. You looked beautiful and smart, just as you do every day." Charlotte gave her mother a glance and nodded, but Catherine could tell that she was still considering the situation. "Mommy, did I embarrass you?" Catherine quickly shook her head and responded, "Never! You could never disappoint me." Sometimes adults say the things they aren't supposed to say. That's not your fault. Charlotte smiled faintly, then looked outside the window as the car drove through towards Kensington Palace. They arrived home just before 4 o'clock. Not long after settling in, George and Louis changed out of their uniforms and headed to the garden to play with William. Charlotte quickly swapped her uniform and ran outside the house to join them to play. Catherine stood by the window watching them play. After lunch, Catherine returned to her study and picked up her mobile. She called Thomas and connected the phone to the headmaster. What was the message that she communicated to the acquaintance of Thomas? That time he spoke very calmly and explained the whole situation, what happened that morning with Mrs. Hall, and what did she say to her. Although she wasn't angry, her voice showed her very serious. She didn't want any trouble, but she believed it was wrong for any teacher to insult any child like that, especially in front of everyone. Mr. Jonathan listened very carefully. He understood how important the situation was and promised to handle it. He said he would talk to Mrs. Hall immediately. After dinner, she sat with the children in the living room and helped George with his homework. William was reading a storybook to Louis on the other sofa. Charlotte sat beside her mother, reading her library book silently. At one point, she looked around and asked softly, "Mommy, do you think Miss—" After putting her arm around her daughter, Catherine murmured, "I believe that Miss could be right." Hall's morning was a dreadful one. Catherine threw her arm around her daughter. She did not manage the matter in a very effective manner, which is a very unfortunate situation. By nodding and handing back the book, Charlotte said, "All right." This does not imply that she does not like you. Nevertheless, if she continues to say something that's hurtful to you, I would appreciate it if you could let me know. Your response would be greatly appreciated. Just exactly was it that she sent to William in that particular moment? William received a note from Catherine in which she spoke highly of the headmaster, describing him as compassionate and considerate. There was a message delivered to William. In addition to expressing his regret for the situation, Mr. Jonathan had notified Miss Hall that he would talk to her about the issue. He also apologized for the situation. William's disposition improved as a whole of the consequence of the knowledge that the school was taking the problem seriously. Being in the company of someone who made their child feel terrible was something that he did not take pleasure doing. When it comes to the classroom, this is especially true. Catherine used the opportunity to express her gratitude to him for the aid that she had gotten. A little period of time was spent by them sitting in silence and reflecting on the activities that had transpired over the day. They both understood the value of safeguarding their children and making certain that they were always treated with care and respect. Both of them were aware of the importance of this fact. Both of them were conscious of how important it was to have done so. Catherine gave a slight nod, but she found herself privately hoping that Miss Hall would reconsider her actions and make some adjustments to her attitude. She was of the opinion that instructors had the ability to either cultivate or destroy the children's sense of self-confidence, and she believed that she deserved to be treated with care. Charlotte was of the opinion that teachers had the capacity to choose. What had happened to her during the course of the day? When a Friday morning rolled around, this was the very first thing that took place. Catherine got up at an unreasonable hour for the second time, made breakfast, and arranged the children's clothes in preparation for school. She did all these things in preparation for the day. A tiny humming sound could be heard coming from Charlotte as she knotted her shoelaces on that particular day. Charlotte appeared to be in her customary cheerful state at that time. While they were approaching the entrance to the school, Miss Hall caught a glimpse of them from a distance. As they got closer, she quickly retreated from them as they got closer. Because of the documents that she was carrying in her hand, she gave the impression that she was occupied with everything that she was doing. A second educator, who went by the name Miss Green, approached the children with a friendly smile on her face in order to be greeted by them. Before extending a warm greeting to Charlotte and Louis, she acknowledged Catherine with a respectful nod and then shifted her attention to Louis and Charlotte. Following that, she returned her attention to Catherine. Immediately following the conclusion of the conversation, Miss Green excused herself and made a clandestine phone call to the office of the headmaster. This was done in a stealthy manner by her. Catherine makes her initial approach to Miss Hall. It was during the time that she was driving back to her house that she was unable to comprehend the reason why Miss Hall was having such a terrible day. Why she was experiencing such a terrible state of mind was beyond her comprehension. On the other hand, now that it's occurred once more, it possesses a nature that's conscious and unsettling at the same time. Although this was the case, Catherine made an effort to keep her concerns at a level that was satisfactory. It never ceased to amaze her how everyone is, in spite of the fact that the headmaster had promised Miss Hall that he would talk to her. He had not yet communicated with her regarding the matter. Due to the fact that he was under the notion that there's still time, he intended to have a talk with her during the staff meeting that was to follow. However, he was completely unaware of the notion that things would deteriorate in such a short amount of time. He was completely unaware by this point. When Miss Hall was at school, it was noticed that she was behaving in an unusual manner. This was something that had been noted. One of the educators who was close to her came to the awareness that something wasn't quite right. This individual was not alone in this realization. Her inquiry was just ignored by Miss Hall, and she did not provide any explanation regarding what it is in particular or how we might assist not only ourselves but also one another. She inquired as to whether or not everything was on the up and up, but Miss Hall chose to disregard her inquiry. Princess Catherine made her customary visit to the school where her children were enrolled in order to reclaim custody of them. This visit took place during the afternoon of that specific day. It has made its appearance on the scene. She found herself confronted by Miss Hall as she reached the entrance of the building. When she looked at her, she was completely taken aback. She was standing immediately next to Charlotte, who was standing in close proximity to her. Without even greeting them properly, Miss Hall looked straight at Catherine and said in a cold tone, "You might want to work more on Charlotte's class attitude. She seems distracted." Catherine stopped. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Calm but firm, she said, "Excuse me, you don't talk to kids like that. In the case that you're going through something, it's essential to discuss it with another person for support and guidance. Don't take it out on children." Miss Hall froze. She didn't expect Catherine to respond like that. She didn't say a word. At that moment, another parent who had overheard everything stepped forward and said, "I think you owe her an apology." But Miss Hall didn't respond, and instead she walked away. One of the teachers nearby saw it all happen and immediately went to inform the headmaster. Not long after, the headmaster, Jonathan, called Miss Hall into his office. "Miss Hall," he said seriously, "I've received reports about your behavior. This is not acceptable." From the perspective of those who are not directly involved. Following her attentive listening, Catherine inquired, "Is she in any danger?" Immediately after the headmaster's talk with Miss Hall, he phoned her and informed her that he and Miss Hall had discussed the fact that she would not be returning for a few days. Catherine continued to listen attentively. "Are you able to provide her with assistance?" The headmaster confirmed that everything that Miss Hall had stated was accurate according to the information that was provided. Catherine remained silent for a brief period of time before expressing her feelings by saying, "If she needs anything, I can do it, or if she wants, we can talk. I'd be happy to talk with her." It was evident that Catherine was grieving more than just her daughter because of the way that it was handled. Furthermore, she was worried about Miss Hall and the actions that were going on behind the scenes. As a consequence of that, Miss Hall decided to take a few days off from her employment. Catherine carried on without deviating from her usual routine during the entirety of that time period. The act of transporting the children to school each morning once they'd been dropped off. Charlotte gave off the impression of being more relaxed. It had been determined that life had returned to normal. On this particular Monday, Miss Hall came back to work for a second day in a row. The morning of that particular day, Charlotte reported feeling a stronger sense of calm, and everything seemed to be in a state of tranquility. Along with everyone else, Miss Hall went back to work on the same day. Charlotte was once again her upbeat and cheerful self, and she was humming softly while she was tightening her shoelaces. The sight of Catherine's daughter in a cheerful disposition brought a smile to her face. On the other hand, an extraordinary thing took place when they arrived to Thomas's residence. As students entered the building, Miss Hall was there to meet them personally. She was standing at the entrance. Upon recognizing Catherine and Charlotte, she immediately stood up and moved ahead in the direction of them. She continued by saying, "Good morning, Princess Charlotte. Good morning, Your Royal Highness," in a manner that was more lighthearted and real than she had been in situations that had previously encountered. "Because I should not have presented myself in such a manner in front of your fellow students, I apologize for my behavior. You present yourself in a manner that's both sophisticated and gorgeous, and you have an amazing reading ability," Charlotte responded with a smile on her face. "Thank you, Miss Hall," as she thanked her mother. Catherine received the message. During that particular Monday, Miss Hall went up to Catherine and expressed her regret to her, saying, "Ma'am, I also want to apologize to you. I was not being honest with myself, and I acted in a manner that was not proper." After that, Catherine responded with a heartfelt, "Thank you, Miss Hall. I appreciate your honesty." However, Catherine did not stop there. She glanced at Miss Hall and asked, "Do you require any kind of assistance?" Catherine dug into her bag and offered Miss Hall a small card, saying, "This is my direct contact." There was a lengthy hesitation before Miss Hall nodded slowly and said, "I think I do. I've just been overwhelmed." Catherine then handed the card to Miss Hall. In the later part of that week, Catherine made good on her promise and established a connection between Miss Hall and one of the groups that she and Prince William are committed to supporting. The mental health and emotional well-being of individuals is the primary emphasis of this organization, which is an initiative. Counseling, support networks, and resources are all made available to individuals who are struggling with stress or anxiety through the organization. It was just around that time. During the course of the program, Miss Hall made contact with Catherine and started attending weekly sessions simultaneously, her mental lucidity gradually returning to her. Subsequently, Miss Hall made contact with Catherine in order to express her gratitude for her generosity and support. During the same week, Catherine was working on her research briefing papers in preparation for her anticipated charitable travels to Birmingham, when Charlotte entered the room in a low voice while carrying a folded note. A note of gratitude that she had written herself, adorned with pink hearts, was presented to Miss Hall as a token of her gratitude for the assistance that she had received with reading. When Catherine finished reading it, she displayed a warm grin because she was moved by her daughter's thoughtfulness. A grin appeared on Miss Hall's face. At the time that they arrived at school, Charlotte was firmly grasping the muffin box while Catherine was walking to her classroom. Miss Hall was standing at the door having a conversation with another educator. She gave Charlotte a friendly smile as soon as she had the opportunity to see her. Charlotte gave the box to her in a stealthy manner, explained that it was for her and the other students in the class. Miss Hall appeared to be taken aback. Before the young girl entered her school, she expressed her gratitude to Charlotte in a heartfelt manner. When Miss Hall turned to Catherine, she pressed the box to her bosom and whispered, "Charlotte was truly a kind child." Catherine shook her head and smiled softly, expressing her gratitude for the opportunity. Catherine experienced an overwhelming sense of pride as she made her way back to the vehicle. Her daughter was developing into a thoughtful, caring, and grounded young lady, which was exactly what she had always hoped for. Thanks for stepping into history with us at Past Paradise. If seeing real faces from the past gives you chills, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more in-depth dives into iconic figures, vintage Hollywood, and the legends who still shape pop culture. Until next time, stay curious, stay classic. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon